Hello, everyone. This is Matt Weinglass filling in for Craig Pasta Jardula here on Pasta to Go. And we have a great interview planned for you today. So we're looking forward to this conversation. So let's go ahead and bring in our next guest. She's a clinical researcher and a Pfizer whistleblower. Please welcome to Pasta to Go, Brook Jackson.
Hey, Matt, how are you?
Great. How are you doing, Brooke?
I'm good. I guess pasta had to go.
Yeah, he had to go, so we're picking it up for him,
No
and
worries.
yeah, definitely. So thanks for being here with us and having this conversation. I know
Sure.
you've been one of the biggest champions that we've seen throughout these last 5 years of the medical freedom movement, particularly in calling out judicially calling out the malpractices and the victims that haven't had justice. And you've been basically championing this for this entire way. Can you give us kind of an update where you are on some of these cases that you've been spearheading? And have we seen any good news in the recent year here since Trump's taken office?
Yeah, that's a packed and kind of loaded question. Have we seen any progress? And I would say yes, absolutely. Especially since Trump has taken office and Secretary Kennedy and others have been placed in, their positions. So yes, I think that there has been great progress, great success. For me, this really started in kind of late 2020 when I was overseeing Pfizer's clinical trial for their COVID vaccine, and witnessed just an extraordinary amount of fraud. And because I knew that the American taxpayers were funding this experiment, and again, seeing the fraud that I did, I knew that I needed to alert the FDA that Pfizer was lying about their study. They were falsifying data, fabricating data, not reporting serious adverse events. We really could spend hours talking about everything that was wrong. But when I went to the FDA, it only took them a few hours to get me removed from my position, which I hadn't been in very long, but I have been a clinical researcher, an auditor of clinical trial data for over 20 years now. And so when I lost my job, I really was shocked. I had never been fired before, loved my job, was really, looking back, there were a lot of things that I wish I knew then that I know now. But then again, maybe not, because I don't know that I would have been working in the field. Like so many other medical professionals, I likely would have pursued another career. I don't know. But then when I got fired and I kind of just sat back and watched and followed very closely what was going on with the COVID situation, I recognized that this was bigger than just the fraud that I reported, and consulted with a few attorneys and moved towards filing what's called a False Claims Act lawsuit. And that is, someone who has direct knowledge of fraud, from the abuse of taxpayer funded dollars. So I filed this lawsuit in January of 2021. And over the last 6 years have really been fighting against Pfizer and their corporate attorneys, me and my few against their 10 or however many they have. It's incredible. But then, Trump comes in and we're thinking, okay, great. We're finally going to have an opportunity to, have this case really heard and some changes be made. And lo and behold, he's taken, his Department of Justice has taken the same position as the Biden administration. And that is that they don't want this case to go forward. And so we recently had in December, the very beginning of December, had oral arguments in the Fifth Circuit in Louisiana. And those arguments, I think, were eye-opening for some, a huge disappointment for me, and why I guess I feel so strongly about this case, and you know, really just trying to get the message out that if fraud is going to be allowed in the clinical trial process, whether we're in the middle of a pandemic or not, we have a serious problem. And so, like I said, here we are 6 years later. Some things good certainly have changed, and others stay the same.
Yeah, it's seemingly very disappointing that you didn't have this shift that was supposed to happen. Though I think when you talk about the Maha movement and a lot of people getting on the Trump team because of RFK Jr., that alignment of medical freedom, make America healthy again, and it seems like there has been a lot of roadblocks. And do you think some of these, like for example, and you said the Trump administration took the same stance as the Biden administration in this regard to this case. There's other things that have happened as well that seem to be the exact opposite of what was RFK and Trump ran on with the Maha movement. For example, we talk about Pfizer, and you talk about the head of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, being invited to the White House and getting this massive opportunity for a new investment in Trump RX. That seems like the exact opposite. When you're out there fighting against Pfizer, how does the CEO get to have this great opportunity to make more money and be told publicly by the president that he is a guy who put humanity over his own business and his own profit? And RFK standing there having to listen to that. I mean, I'm sure for me, that made me really, really upset. I'm sure that even made you even more furious to me. Why do you think something like that was able to happen? And what kind of is this because of incompetence, or is there an actual message being sent to people like you by this administration that, hey, you're on your own?
I think both. I think it's kind of like you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. Maybe I really don't know. And I hate it that politics are so heavily involved in our medicine. Those two things should be completely separate. So yeah, it was discouraging. I remember RFK standing behind Trump and Bourla during those White House visits, and I can only imagine that it's difficult for him as well, knowing what he knows about Pfizer and their criminal history. And that always begs the question for me, like why actually would we want to contract and develop a medical product with an organization like Pfizer? You're asking for trouble. When you look at their history, criminal fines, civil fines, they're one of the highest. So it is discouraging. But I have to think back to how long this has been going on. This is almost a century of crap in medicine and vaccines and trying to just hold those so close to them that it's money, it's power, it's bullshit. And I've had enough, really, to be honest. And that's why I keep talking about it. It's not my case. This isn't Brook Jackson's case. It has my name on it, but it belongs to the American people. They used our taxpayer dollars to fund ineffective product, a fraudulent product, and I want a refund. I want it back in the federal fisc, and with any whistleblower reward that I'm entitled to for bringing this case forward, that needs to go to the victims and those that have been harmed by their quote unquote vaccine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And this fight clearly is not even close to seeing the goal line. We can't even see that light at the end of the tunnel. It seems like a very long tunnel, longer than originally anticipated. We talk about like the priorities, like when we see, what can be accomplished right now, while Trump is still in office, and you have, 3 more years really of this term. You got RFK Jr. in this HHS position. We've seen many wins. We've seen little tiny mini celebrations.
But is that to just appease the people? Is that just to like tide us over
Yeah,
until what's coming next? And that's kind of what I talk about in my circle of friends, is man, we really have a lot of work to do. And I certainly have to, give grace to the people that are in there fighting for the changes that can be made, on the face. But what happens in, a few years when Secretary Kennedy is no longer in office, when Jay Bhattacharya leaves the NIH, or when, well, we don't really have anybody on our side, I don't think, in FDA. But what happens when they leave? They're just going to reverse policy, and we're going to be right back where we are, unless some meaningful change. And by that, I think where I'm standing, it's clinical research, it's fraud. If you're going to allow that anywhere near our drug approval process, then nothing else matters, because that's where it starts. That's how you get a medicine or a device or a vaccine to market, is through a clinical trial. And they love to talk about how we don't have gold standard for this vaccine on the childhood scheduler. We don't have comparator studies, long-term safety studies. Well, how come they won't talk about Pfizer's clinical trial fraud? None of them will, even the ones that I consider my friends. Yeah. And to me, that's very telling, and why I can no longer support certain organizations and align with that. This whole MAHA thing, who doesn't want to make America healthy again? That doesn't mean I can't say stop the shots, or Pfizer's a criminal organization, and that I have to be full stop support Trump. That's not what that means. So I'm disappointed in some things, and I'm very grateful for others. So I think that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And I hear what you're saying. I really appreciate the attempt, at least, to separate politics from humanity, which is really what we're talking about. Health and wellness should not be political. It's just a human issue that we all should want the best for ourselves and our family, and we want to live healthy lives. So how do we do that? Well, first of all, we do one thing. It might not be taking mRNA off the shelves, which we really need to have. That needs to happen like yesterday, right? mRNA off the shelves. That doesn't seem to be happening. But the next thing down from that, I would say, is stopping the mandates, right? So you have this childhood vaccine schedule. This was kind of some good news we saw. I got to say, this is something positive. We saw that the health officials have slashed the number of vaccines recommended for all kids. Now, this is from NPR, so they're going to do their little spin like this is some oh no, what are they doing in HHS? What is RFK Jr. up for? So what's he up to here? Well, they're saying it's an unprecedented change. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention reducing the number of vaccines routinely recommended for all children from 17 to 11. And they did severely reduce it, which this is good news. On the new schedule, the ones that had previously been recommended to all children, including rotavirus, hepatitis A and B, meningitis, and seasonal flu, are now more restricted. I like how they say restricted. In other words, you're taking the mandate off and allowing a conversation between parents and healthcare providers. So this is
which you think would already be happening anyways, right, Matt? Like, shouldn't you be having an informed consent discussion about the risks and benefits of anything that you put into your body? To me, that's just duh. But
I mean, shared decision making, like that's a duh, right? That's how we should have always been.
We weren't sharing it before, and I think I'm disappointed in that phrase, shared decision making, because to me, it's just a way of sidestepping what needs to happen with some of these products, is that they need to be banned.
Yeah,
they need to
be banned
off. They need to be unavailable, especially the mRNA products. They're dangerous. They're toxic. They're poison. And the sad thing is that they know this. I'm 100% certain that NIH, that CDC, that FDA, that HHS, certainly DOJ and Mr. Trump himself are aware of my allegations, And I was telling you and your producer prior to us going live that I want the American people to understand that it doesn't. I'm not a rocket scientist. Okay, I had no idea what the False Claims Act was. I knew certainly that there is fraud in government, agencies, et cetera. We're trained about that. We're trained on that, especially with what I did as a clinical researcher. But I had no idea what a False Claims Act case was. But everybody uses AI now. You have Google or whatever search engine you use. Type in False Claims Act cases in medical products. You'll find that this is not a one-off. It happens very frequently. Some products where these types of cases have been brought have been removed from the market completely, and pharmaceutical companies held responsible. And that's what I want to bring attention to, is that how is the Department of Justice going to allow charges to be brought against one pharmaceutical company for doing the same thing that Pfizer has done, but letting Pfizer off the hook? And, I think that I know that is because this fraud implicates people in our government as high as it goes, and they don't want to be embarrassed. And it would certainly, some people have compared it to other like crisis that we've had in the United States where it could potentially bankrupt us. Not that we're not already there. I just don't really think people understand that. But anyway, it would cost them too much money. They would be responsible for the death and suffering and injury and disability of an untold number of American people. And it's a hard stop for me. I just cannot get with it. I just can't.
Yeah, no, this is a good distinction to make between a company as big as Pfizer. You're talking about, I guess you could borrow some language from the housing crisis era. They're too big to fail, right? You're talking about the entire economy, our entire system falling apart, not just the embarrassment you mentioned, but the entire system itself would unravel if you're actually going to get Pfizer to be held responsible for these crimes, because all of these other things then become affected. And meanwhile, you have Trump trying to basically do new deals with new mRNA and new technology and AI and all this stuff. You got Larry Ellison meeting with him like on day 2 of the second term. And you're just like, what? We're going literally in the wrong direction. But it's because it seems that these companies seem to be controlling our government from the outside in. And so again, we're trying to keep politics out of this. But how can you if these corporations like Pfizer have a massive, not just influence, but seemingly they are the ones puppeteering this from the outside in? That's what it seems like to me. Because why else would you have, right? Why else would you give a $50 billion deal or a $500 billion deal to Larry Ellison and his mRNA cancer idea, which is like pre-crime, but it's like pre-health, right? We're going to tell you you have cancer before you actually have it, and then we're going to give you some gene therapy to treat it before we can even detect it because our AI told us to do it. It's unbelievable. The future that we are setting up here, it's pretty scary. I don't know, like Brooke, like
I'm terrified. It scares me, and I guess my advice to people is just to stay vigilant. Find a resource, find an outlet that you trust and follow them. And what I learned and what I can't tell you. I'm obviously unemployed now. Thank you, Pfizer. But I spend hours a week, reading and following different court cases. And there's so many things that I find, and on the historical record in terms of law that kind of help me guide my way through the world nowadays. And what I learn, my kids learn, so they're able to think for themselves and school, that's something else, what I what I see them coming home with. And again, we just talk about it. We have dinner and we sit at the table or on the way to practice, whatever, we have these conversations, and some of them are tough, but they have to happen.
Yeah. It's a new era we're in now where we have to do your own research and have these discussions
Well, we should be doing it anyway, right? Like that's one of the
right.
things I kick myself in the butt for not doing. You know, I guess I just had this built-in trust for medicine. You know, I'd been doing it for so long, and really to that of my government. You know, I come from a military family. We followed the chain of command, and you know, I just trusted. I thought people that were, you know, above me, you know, in my field, we kind of gather the scientific data, then we pass that along to the pharmaceutical company, and then, you know, that you know gets, and it just goes up, right? And you think that everybody that is above you is doing things the way that you are, and I wish I wouldn't have thought that way, you know, but parts of me are grateful or thankful that I kind of, my eyes were opened in the way that they were. So yeah, it's just, it's tough. But, you know, what I was saying earlier is that, you know, these cases, these False Claims Act cases are brought on behalf of the American people. This case is yours. It's mine. It's my neighbors. And again, I want fraud to be taken seriously, especially when it's involving our medical products, device products, vaccines. This is serious. This isn't a vaccine war. I didn't file this case to get all vaccines removed from the schedule, or even get the mRNA at that time taken off of the schedule. I wanted Pfizer to be held accountable for lying to the FDA, for, you know, stealing our taxpayer dollars, and I wanted a refund. You know, it wasn't until late in 2021 that I really started to recognize what this product was doing to people, and that came about in a crazy way. And that's a story for another day. But yeah, I mean, I just it's disheartening. It really is. You know, I want justice for the people that have been harmed by this, and I want a refund.
Well, I think what you're indicating here is the silver lining of these last 6 years seems to be that this automatic trust that most of us, everyone seemed to have, I had it, is no longer there. And that's good. That's the silver lining here, that we are skeptical first. Prove us wrong. We're going to be skeptical first when a new product comes to the market. I mean, we talk about Ozempic. I mean, right away. I mean, here's something that if Ozempic had come out 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I think myself and family member, we would have just been like, oh, great. They finally came up with a thing that can help people. Now we don't do that anymore, right? We see the thing and we go, okay, what is the part about this product they're not telling us? How are they making their money on this? And what is the gimmick? What is the marketing scheme that's going to get people hooked on this thing? And then create 5 different side effects that are going to require 5 more medications, right? So that's the scheme that we never looked out for before. So you would think, like, I guess this is good, right? That we can start going, wait a minute, what's going on there, right? Are we having more conversations now? Yeah, go ahead.
Totally, right? But what my question is, what made your eyes open?
You know, I think it was the fact that, and I, not as a medical professional, but as somebody with common sense and just critical thinking skills, I guess I assumed that the definition of medicine was having conversations. The definition of science was having conversations, was always second opinions. I always looked at it like when I get my car, you know, inspected by one mechanic, I want to go look at another one. So when they took that away in 2020, and they said, you can't get a second opinion. And I was seeing second opinions everywhere. I would, because I wanted to see, what are we dealing with? My critical thinking skills, when we had that lockdown, they tapped right in. I was like, I was interested. I was curious. I think that's where that was my red flag, was that I was curious. And yet everybody around me, I'm here in Hollywood, and I'm telling you, nobody wanted to ask questions. Everybody was like, shut up with your dangerous conversations. Listen to what they tell you, 6 feet apart, lock it down, wait for further instructions. I go, that's not how things work. Why are we trying to do this now? And I saw the fear factor was certainly playing a role. And so I guess I would say I had it almost immediately. And the only thing I regret, Brooke, and I tell people this on our show, because I wasn't doing this independent media space at the time. I was doing Hollywood full time, and you have to comply with people you're working with and keep your mouth shut. I regret that. I don't know if I had a choice at the time, but if I had this platform, I guarantee you, I would have been more vocal about it. I kind of regret that I got quiet and I kind of played along, if you know what I mean. I did the little play along thing so I wouldn't get canceled. But you know what? I had enough, and I said, you know what? I'm going to start having these conversations, and we started doing that, and that's actually gave birth to my independent media and doing the Homeless Left and working with amazing people like Pasta and Fee and all these other people as a result of that that shift that happened. So that's my story. Yeah. Where did you first?
It was the clinical trial. I mean, it was the fraud in the clinical trial. I saw it firsthand, and I thought, man, the simple thing to do here to fix this is to just exclude the data that my sites were collecting. And they didn't want to do that. And then so I just started, kind of following, and it just all kind of just made sense. But I worry about my neighbor, right? Who's busy, who has 2 jobs, who has 3 little kids, her husband travels, who just comes home and it's crazy. I mean, laundry and getting them fed and homework and, everything else that comes along, from day to day, who just happens to flip on the news to whatever channel it is. And they hear the same freaking thing, the flu's the worst it's going to be. And, COVID, if you don't get 18 shots, your kid's going to die. And, I worry about them, right? They just haven't had the moment that you had or that I had. Maybe there's just so much going on, whatever the excuse is. That's who I worry about, because they're out there, those people are out there, and to them we seem crazy, or maybe they just don't know, these other alternative media exist, and there's places to get other information besides CNN or even Fox, or, your doctor who's making money on these things.
Well, I think the doctor, and like we talk about the children and the pediatricians out there. I mean, these are the worst, because you're not just turning on a TV and then turning it off. You're kind of stuck in a room. You're in this kind of police interrogation situation where you can't get up and leave. You say, am I being detained here? Like it gets bad. Like we've talked to parents that they have woken up and they want to have these honest discussions with their pediatrician. They can't do it because the pediatrician is so they're like these thugs that get right in their face and they say, you're going to do this or else. And it's really, really bad. What do you recommend people do if they find themselves in these situations where they feel
I can't even imagine being in a room with my pediatrician and ever feeling anything other than comfortable. I never was before. I'll be honest with your audience. My kids were completely up to date on the childhood immunization schedule. I got the flu vaccine every year, as did they. This was prior to 2020. Currently, I mean, we haven't been to the pediatrician since 2020. My advice is to find another doctor. If you feel like you're being held hostage in a medical exam room, then get the hell out of there. And there's no way that I would have ever felt uncomfortable asking my doctor a question. Did I ask the right questions prior to 2020? No, I didn't. And she didn't give me the complete and true, informed consent either. But, again, you said, oh man, I wish I would have said something when I was, trying to just kind of go along. Well, maybe they feel that way too. So where do we give grace? I just, maybe they just don't know yet themselves. There is a machine out there that, it's kind of how I talked about the military chain of command. These doctors aren't trained appropriately in medical school even. Look at the changes that are currently being made to the nutrition schedule, the food pyramid, the vaccine schedule. science is ever changing. There's so much information out there. And I encourage any medical professional, any parent, any just layperson, just read. I mean, I know that's sometimes hard to do with the hustle and bustle of every day, but I get a lot of my information by just Googling, reading court cases and, staying on these different alternative media sources. I might have Fox News on in the background or whatever's on, but I certainly, when they say something like, "Oh, the flu is super bad this year," well, I'll go and look, and really it may not be, or maybe it is. I don't really pay attention to that. So
the flu being bad is so interesting, because the one year we had 0 cases of flu. You guys remember 2021? Nobody died of the flu. It's so bizarre that one year. It's weird how math works, but apparently, according to Fauci, yeah, there was no flu deaths in 2021. But the point is that COVID or no COVID, we just have to look out for our own health, our own health, our own well-being. And the way we do that is preventative care. We talk about, the natural, the way you can get, sunlight and vitamin D and zinc and all these very natural ways you can keep yourself healthy and prevent serious flu, prevent these things from taking over your body, because we protect our own immune systems, and we can do that without Pfizer making a ton of money off of it. And I think that's why they don't tell us. That's why in the lockdown we were told to stay inside and not go to the gym and not be outside and exercise. And they weren't talking about these things. So I think that's a big takeaway. And I think people need to know that we can do that ourselves. We don't need a prescription, right, for sunlight. We don't need a prescription for exercise. So I throw that out to our audience. Yeah.
Man, since COVID, since 2020, I mean, my thought process and my view on so many things has changed, but specifically on health. I mean, that has been a huge change. We're growing our own vegetables now. So me and the kids are out in the garden, and we're working on, getting our planter boxes set up for the spring. And, I have my winter vegetables out there growing. So, I mean, it's totally changed for the better in some ways, but then, I still feel really pissed off at my government, for allowing this fraud, for participating and for being complicit, or, however you want to describe that. Fraud is fraud. And I would love it to stop, especially in the pharmaceutical space.
So my I guess final question, we got to wrap it up here, Brooke, but my final question to you would be, aside, if people are stumbling on you right now and watching this, and they're just, or in whatever way they are in their lives, that this is their wake up moment right now, where do they, besides, I want you to tell us where they can follow you, absolutely, and follow what you're doing, but do you have any other recommendations where people can start, and like people that you trust in this medical freedom community, that have been consistent, that have had principles, that have shown their humanity throughout this, and especially at the hardest times, like you have done, the courage it's taken to keep those principles. Who would you recommend for people, and also let people know where they can find you as well?
Well, I never did social media. Of course, I had like Facebook, but I would just post pictures of my kids for my friends and family. I mean, I've never been big into social media, and only opened up a X account or Twitter, whatever it is, when my case became public in 2021. So it's really easy. It's I am Brook Jackson. So that's where you can find me. I do have all of my court documents as well up on a website that my husband created for us. It's iambrookjackson.com. So super simple. But damn, Matt, that's a really good question on like who would I recommend people follow? There aren't very many, to be honest. Yeah. I
was hoping you weren't going to say that, but I kind of knew that was coming.
I'm sorry. It's just
I know.
It is what it is, and I'm not gonna mislead people in any way. This is my journey. I'm just sharing it. but a lot of the organizations that I love and do still support monetarily, I'm not going to do that publicly anymore because I recognize certain things. Even Secretary Kennedy, do I trust him? Kinda. Um, he's in a position where he's able to make meaningful change, positive changes, but are they what needs to be done? And that answer is no.
Hmm.
And in my opinion, what that is the mRNA shots need to be taken off of the market.
Yeah.
Based on everything that we know. And again, I'm kind of looking at this, with a focus on the fraud, right? I mean, but there's so much. But I'll just throw out a name: Mary Talley Bowden.
Yep.
Dr. Mary Talley Bowden. She is one that has never wavered. She always says what she's thinking, what's on her mind, and she speaks the truth. And is not going to back down from bullies online. Others that, think that she needs to just be quiet and stop saying this or stop saying that. We're making meaningful change. Well, fine, but it's only going to be meaningful for a little bit unless we put the hammer down, right?
Yeah, and I'll throw in a definitely back you up on Dr. Mary Talley Bowden, who's been on our show, The Homeless Left, and I know Greg Pasta as well. And I'll tell you this: when you turn down $1.5 million in bribe money, that's a good place to start as far as character and courage goes, and that's what she did. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Same with me. My company offered a settlement. I was going to say probably 2022, early mid 2022, and it would have been nice, but it's not worth the integrity. It's not worth the time. It's not worth. So when you walk away from things like that, it does say something.
Yeah.
So definitely one I would follow. I mean, there's so many others. You put me on the spot, damn it.
No, that's a great place to start. And anybody who's just waking up, we welcome you into the conversation. Absolutely. And the place of courage and asking questions and doing the things we should have been doing our whole lives. But hey, it's never too late to start. And so might as well start now. Brook Jackson, thank you so much for being with us on Pasta to Go today. People can follow you at iambrookjackson.com. Is that right?
That's it.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brook.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Okay. Bye-bye. All right.